They say betrayal cuts deepest when it comes from the one you love. But for 36-year-old Marcus Tillman, betrayal didn't just wound. It ignited a deadly rage. When he returned home early from a canceled work shift, what he found behind his bedroom door shattered his world. His wife of 6 years, naked and laughing, in their marital bed with a local delivery man. Within minutes, a once quiet suburban home turned into a blood-soaked crime scene. 2 gunshots, 2 lives ended, and a chilling attempt to erase it all by dumping their bodies in a murky lagoon. But secrets don't stay buried forever. Marcus and Tasha Tillman were, on the surface, a typical working-class couple trying to build a quiet life in the suburbs of Baton Rouge, Louisiana. They met in 2015 at a cousin's backyard barbecue, where Marcus was helping flip burgers, and Tasha showed up with a bottle of wine and a smile that didn't go unnoticed. Their chemistry was instant. Within a year, they were inseparable, married 6 months later in a small church ceremony with close friends and family. Marcus Tillman, 36, worked as a forklift operator at a logistics company just outside the city. He was known among co-workers as dependable, punctual, and quiet. He rarely missed a shift and kept to himself, often eating lunch in his car while listening to sports radio or gospel music. His manager once described him as the kind of guy who stays out of trouble and minds his business. Friends said Marcus wasn't flashy, but he was loyal to a fault. He paid the bills, stayed out of the streets, and tried to be the man he thought a husband should be. Tasha Tillman, 33, was different. She was bubbly, outgoing, and made friends wherever she went. She worked part-time as a hairdresser at a local salon and ran a small beauty business from home doing lashes and nails. Her Instagram was full of selfies, motivational quotes, and before and after shots of her clients. People describe her as ambitious, sharp-tongued, and always chasing something bigger. While Marcus was content with a simple life, Tasha wanted more money, more freedom, more excitement. Their relationship, in the early years, appeared solid. They posted anniversary dinners, family cookouts, and vacations to Gulf shores. But behind the filtered photos, tensions began to rise. According to neighbors, the couple had loud arguments that sometimes spilled into the driveway. A former friend of Tasha's said she had started complaining more about Marcus, about his lack of ambition, his routines, and emotional distance that had grown between them. She used to say he was a good man, but boring, the friend shared. Like she appreciated what he did, but she didn't feel alive with him anymore. Marcus, by contrast, remained loyal. If he sensed something was wrong, he didn't show it publicly. He told a co-worker once that marriage gets tough, but you just keep showing up. It wasn't until the last year of their relationship that others started noticing real cracks. Tasha had begun staying out later, often using her beauty business as an excuse to attend networking events or client parties. Marcus, trusting by nature, rarely questioned her. He believed in giving his wife space and never wanted to seem controlling. But things changed when Marcus came home unexpectedly one afternoon in late summer. His shift had been canceled due to equipment failure, and instead of calling ahead, he decided to surprise Tasha with lunch. What happened next would become the center of a horrifying investigation. Unbeknownst to Marcus, Tasha had been growing increasingly detached, not just emotionally, but physically. She had formed a relationship with a 29-year-old delivery driver named Jamal Rivers, who regularly dropped off packages in the neighborhood. Their affair, according to texts later retrieved from her phone, had been going on for nearly 3 months. The exchanges were flirtatious, explicit, and often reckless. Tasha had even joked about Marcus, never knowing what's right under his nose. What pushed her into that affair is hard to define. Was it boredom, loneliness, or the thrill of danger? No one could say for certain. But the disconnect between husband and wife had become a chasm, and one impulsive decision, one betrayal in the sacred space of their home, would lead to a deadly and irreversible unraveling. As the honeymoon glow faded, Marcus and Tasha Tillman's marriage began to show signs of quiet unraveling, first in whispers, then in full-blown arguments that occasionally echoed down their quiet suburban street. What started as petty disagreements over household chores or missed calls eventually evolved into days of icy silence and late-night shouting matches that neighbors tried to ignore but couldn't help overhearing. For Marcus, the shift felt like a slow erosion. He couldn't point to a single moment where things changed, but he noticed that Tasha laughed less with him and spent more time on her phone. She began dressing differently, more stylish, more revealing, and started going out without offering much explanation. Business appointments, she'd say with a dismissive wave when asked. Marcus wanted to believe her, but deep down, something gnawed at him. He started mentioning it at work, said Dion, a co-worker and longtime friend of Marcus. Like, Tasha's been acting funny, or she's always texting someone. At first, we just chalked it up to married life, but it got more serious. Marcus wasn't a jealous type, but he wasn't naive either. When he noticed unfamiliar cologne lingering in their bedroom one evening, his stomach dropped. Tasha brushed it off, claimed it was a client's product she'd tested during a house call. Marcus didn't push, but the unease lingered. According to friends, Tasha had begun confiding in people about her dissatisfaction with the marriage. She'd tell her close circle that Marcus lacked ambition, that he had no drive, no passion. He just comes home, eats, and watches TV, she complained to one friend. I need someone who brings fire, not routine. While her words painted Marcus as dull, friends noted she never once mentioned abuse or mistreatment. If anything, Marcus's biggest flaw was his predictability. Family gatherings became awkward. Marcus grew quieter. Tasha seemed distracted. Marcus's sister, Keisha, recalled one Sunday dinner where Tasha spent most of the time on her phone, texting and giggling. She wasn't even trying to hide it, Keisha said. Marcus looked hurt, but he didn't say a word. That's how he is. Keeps everything bottled up. The emotional distance between them widened in plain view. Tasha started sleeping in the guest room some nights, citing early work or needing space. Marcus pretended not to notice. He wanted to save the marriage, Keisha added, but she was already halfway out the door. It wasn't long before others began noticing red flags. A neighbor spotted Tasha getting out of a silver sedan late at night, long after Marcus had gone to bed. Another time, Marcus came home early and found Tasha, visibly flustered, hurrying someone out the back door. She claimed it was her cousin. He didn't ask further. Some thought Marcus knew deep down that something was happening, but chose denial over confrontation. He loved her, Dion said, probably more than she ever knew, but I think that love blinded him. Still, there were limits. The tension began affecting Marcus's work. He was late a few times, a first for him. He lost weight. He looked tired. Coworkers noted how withdrawn he became. He started second-guessing himself. Dion said, like, am I not enough? It was sad to watch. By the summer of 2023, their marriage was hanging by a thread. While Marcus tried to hold on, Tasha seemed to have emotionally checked out. Her secret affair with the delivery man, Jamal Rivers, had intensified, and though she may have believed she could keep her double life hidden, the truth was creeping closer by the day. Little did either of them know. The tension building inside Marcus wasn't just heartbreak. It was pressure, and eventually that pressure would explode in the most tragic, irreversible way possible. It was a humid Friday morning in July, just another typical day for most people in the sleepy town of Easton Heights. But for Marcus Tillman, this day would burn into memory and make headlines across the state. He had no idea when he left for work that morning that his life was about to splinter in ways he couldn't imagine. Marcus had been up earlier than usual. He didn't sleep well the night before, kept awake by a nagging sense that something wasn't right. Tasha had been cold again, short answers, no eye contact, scrolling endlessly on her phone late into the night. She claimed to have an afternoon appointment with a client and insisted he shouldn't come home early. That only made his stomach turn. At 6:30 a.m., Marcus left for his shift at the local shipping warehouse. He drove the same route he'd driven for 5 years. Same parking spot, same locker, but he wasn't focused. Co-workers noticed he was quieter than usual, distracted, and even jumped when his phone buzzed. He wasn't himself. Around noon, a delivery driver named Jamal Rivers arrived at Marcus and Tasha's residence. Neighbors saw him park his van in the driveway, a regular occurrence, but this time he didn't unload any packages. Instead, he walked right up to the front door and was let in within seconds. He was smiling. So was she. At 1:15 p.m., Marcus's supervisor asked if he could stay for a few extra hours to cover someone's shift. Marcus declined, said he wasn't feeling well. He clocked out at 1:30 p.m., an hour and a half earlier than usual. He didn't call ahead. He didn't text. He just drove home, the silence in the car heavier than ever. When he pulled into the neighborhood around 2:10 p.m., he immediately spotted the unfamiliar delivery van in his driveway. His first thought was confusion. No scheduled deliveries. No packages expected. His second thought? Realization. The kind that made his chest tighten and his grip on the steering wheel stiffen. According to surveillance footage later reviewed by police, Marcus parked half a block away and walked the rest of the way to his home. He moved with purpose, shoulders tense, jaw clenched. He didn't ring the bell. He used his key. Inside, the house was quiet, eerily quiet. He could hear faint music playing from the bedroom upstairs, a scent unfamiliar to him. Spicy cologne lingered in the hallway. He crept up the stairs. With each step, His heart pounded harder, a mix of dread, rage, and heartbreak bubbling to the surface. He opened the bedroom door. There they were, Tasha and Jamal, tangled in sheets, lost in each other, completely unaware they had an audience. Witnesses later described hearing what sounded like muffled yelling, followed by two sharp, thunderous cracks. Then silence. Marcus had brought his legally owned firearm home 2 nights before. He claimed it was for safety after hearing about recent break-ins in the area. But now it sat in his hand, warm from use. Within minutes, the bodies of Tasha Tillman and Jamal Rivers were wrapped hastily in sheets, loaded into the back of Marcus's pickup truck. Neighbors would later recall seeing Marcus drive off in a rush, sweat beating down his face, jaw locked tight, but no one thought much of it at the time. By 5 p.m., Marcus had dumped both bodies in secluded marshlands near Crenshaw Lagoon, a remote area known only to locals and fishermen. The site was muddy, overgrown, and rarely visited. Marcus returned home that evening, changed clothes, cleaned the truck as best he could, and disposed of the sheets and personal items. To anyone else, it looked like a normal night, but to Marcus, the world had shifted beneath him. At 8:47 p.m., he called 911. "My wife's missing," he told the dispatcher, his voice trembling but steady. "She was supposed to be home this afternoon. I think something's wrong." The lie had begun. What Marcus didn't know, however, was that the truth had already started unraveling behind him. From curious neighbors to digital footprints to traces of blood, he thought he had cleaned. The day that started with quiet suspicion had ended in cold-blooded violence, and the clock had begun ticking toward his inevitable downfall. When Marcus Tillman stood at the bedroom door that afternoon, the scene before him didn't just shatter his trust. It broke something inside him. There, in their shared bed, the bed he had helped pick out, the one they had slept in together for nearly 6 years, with his wife, Tasha Tillman, laughing in the arms of another man. Jamal Rivers, a delivery driver with a casual charm and a careless grin, wasn't just delivering packages anymore. In that moment, Marcus saw not just betrayal, but erasure. Everything he thought he knew about his marriage, his home, his future, it all collapsed in an instant. Marcus didn't scream. He didn't lash out immediately. He stood frozen for several seconds, the door ajar, staring. It was the kind of moment that could have ended with him turning around and walking out. But the rage came fast, cold and focused. According to forensic psychologists later consulted during the trial, it was a textbook example of snapping, a psychological breaking point driven by emotional trauma and deep personal violation. The shouting began first. Tasha scrambled from the bed, yelling at Marcus to calm down. Jamal attempted to address, stammering something about misunderstanding and not knowing she was married. But Marcus wasn't listening. His mind had already left a gun in the closet, a Glock 19 he had kept in a locked case for emergencies. He retrieved it silently, while Tasha pleaded with him to put it down. But to Marcus, there was no talking anymore. According to ballistics and autopsy reports, Marcus fired 2 shots. The first hit Jamal in the chest. As he tried to approach Marcus with his hands up, he collapsed instantly. The second shot struck Tasha in the abdomen as she lunged toward her husband, either in fear or in a final effort to stop him. She fell beside the bed, gasping and clutching her side. Marcus stared at her for a moment. Witnesses would later say he told investigators he didn't feel real at that point. Then, in what the prosecutor described as a chilling act of calculated coldness, he stepped forward and shot her one final time, in the head. Silence. The gunfire echoed in the walls of the house, but neighbors thought it was fireworks or a car backfiring. No one called the police. No one knew what had happened. Yet, now faced with the reality of what he'd done, Marcus didn't call 911. He didn't try to run. Instead, he moved quickly, calmly, almost methodically. He retrieved the old Army duffel bags from the garage, left over from his brief time in the National Guard. He rolled each body into the sheets and zipped them inside, avoiding blood contact as best as he could. He cleaned the floors, removed the bullets he could find, and wiped down every surface with bleach. By 3:45 p.m., both bodies were loaded into the bed of his black Dodge Ram pickup. He used a tarp to conceal them and tossed a few old lawn tools over top to make it seem like a trip to the dump. At 5:06 p.m., Marcus was captured on a rural gas station's CCTV about 40 minutes outside of town. He bought a single bottle of water, paid in cash, and barely spoke. That gas station was just 10 minutes from Crenshaw Lagoon, the same place his father used to take him fishing as a boy. Remote, marshy, forgotten. He backed the truck into the tree line, carried the bodies one at a time, and dumped them into the algae-filled water, weighted them with cinder blocks from the bed of his truck. It was quick, brutal, effective, or so he thought. Afterward, Marcus changed into fresh clothes and woods, burned the bloodied ones in a makeshift pit, and drove home in eerie calm. He ate dinner, watched the news. Then, at 8:47 p.m., he made the call. "My wife's missing." He said it without flinching. To the outside world, Marcus Tillman had just become a worried husband trying to locate his wife. But in truth, he had already silenced her and the man who crossed the line. The double murder was no longer a crime of passion. It was now a cover-up, a desperate attempt to outrun the truth that had already started closing in. By the time Marcus Tillman stood over the bodies of his wife Tasha and the man she betrayed him with, the house was silent. Too silent. The air felt heavier, thicker, as if even the walls understood the horror that had just unfolded. But Marcus didn't scream. He didn't cry. What he did next, according to investigators, was chilling in its precision. First, he closed the bedroom door and opened the windows. He didn't want the neighbors catching the scent of blood, just in case it lingered. He then retrieved an old duffel bag from the attic, large military style, with faded camouflage and rusted zippers. It wasn't the first time Marcus had handled something heavy. His short stint in the National Guard years earlier had taught him how to carry dead weight. One by one, he wrapped the bodies in bed sheets. Not too tight. He didn't want blood seeping through. He lined the duffel with a black plastic contractor bag before sliding Jamal's body inside. Tasha's went into a second bag. The sheets she'd bought just weeks ago, navy blue cotton with floral trim, were now her shroud. With both bags zipped up, Marcus placed them in the bed of his Dodge Ram. He covered them with a tarp, then threw on a lawnmower, some yard tools, and a couple of old trash bags to make it look like he was hauling junk. He even sprinkled some fertilizer on top to help mask the smell of blood if anyone happened to walk by. By 4:15 p.m., he was on the road. His destination was Crenshaw Lagoon, a forgotten stretch of murky water about 45 minutes outside town. It was a place only the locals knew about, surrounded by overgrown trees and old fishing docks. No cameras, no cell towers, just stillness. He arrived just after 5 p.m., according to timestamps from a nearby gas station where he was caught on surveillance buying a bottle of water. The footage showed him alone, wearing gloves, avoiding eye contact, and paying in cash. At the lagoon, Marcus backed his truck into the tree line. He dragged the duffel bags out, first Jamal, then Tasha, and carried them to the water's edge. Each bag was tied shut and weighted with cinder blocks he had stashed beneath the tarp. With a heavy grunt, he rolled the bags into the lagoon. The splash was loud, echoing across the empty forest, then silence again. The water swallowed them whole. To finish the job, Marcus lit a small fire in a pit nearby. He burned the blood-soaked sheets, his gloves, and the clothes he'd been wearing during the killings. He changed into a clean outfit, jeans, a t-shirt, and sneakers, and stuffed the burned remains into a trash bag, which he dumped at a gas station dumpster on the way back. Back home by 7:30 p.m., he got into the shower, scrubbed twice, cleaned beneath his fingernails. Then, at 8:47 p.m., he made the call that launched the search. "My wife's missing," he told the dispatcher, his voice flat. He told them she'd gone out for groceries around noon and hadn't returned. He suggested maybe she'd run off. She'd been distant lately, after all. He even volunteered to show officers around the house. The sheets were freshly changed. The gun? Still there, locked in its case. He claimed he hadn't touched it in weeks. Neighbors later said he seemed calm. Too calm. One woman even noted how Marcus asked about her dog's health that evening, like it was any other day. But investigators weren't convinced. There were no receipts from a grocery store, no outgoing calls or texts from Tasha's phone after 1 p.m. And when officers checked Marcus's truck, they found traces of bleach in the bed liner. No blood, but the scent was strong, overpowering. Marcus thought he'd erased everything. But secrets like these don't stay buried for long, especially not when a storm rolls in and the lagoon begins to rise. At precisely 8:47 p.m., the calm voice of Marcus Tillman came through the 911 dispatch line. "My wife's missing," he said. "She left for groceries this afternoon and hasn't come back." The operator asked the usual questions. When was the last time he saw her? What was she wearing? Was this out of character? Marcus answered each one methodically, emotionless. He sounded concerned, but not panicked. Calm, but not too calm. It raised a red flag, even if no one could quite explain why. An officer was dispatched to the couple's home around 9:15 p.m. The house was quiet, neat, and undisturbed. Marcus greeted them at the door in clean clothes, smelling of aftershave. He walked them through the house, showing no signs of forced entry or struggle. The master bedroom was spotless, the bed freshly made, pillows fluffed. Too perfect. He told the officer Tasha had mentioned going to the grocery store around noon, but never returned. Her phone was going straight to voicemail, and she wasn't answering any texts. He suggested maybe she was upset about something. She'd been distant lately, he said. I thought she just needed space. The officer filed a missing persons report, but something about the visit stuck. There were no grocery bags, no to-do list, no shopping app open on her tablet. For someone supposedly running errands, Tasha hadn't prepared for anything. The next morning, a patrol officer returned to follow up. This time, Marcus seemed less put together. Tired, maybe, nervous. He kept his answers short and didn't ask many questions. And when they requested to see the security cameras from a neighbor's house across the street, Marcus's mood changed, stiffening, visibly uncomfortable. Meanwhile, Tasha's family was frantic. Her sister, Lorna, drove down from Chattanooga that same evening. She told detectives this was completely out of character. She wouldn't just vanish, Lorna said. Tasha was grounded, responsible. If she was late by even 10 minutes, she'd text. A missing woman is one thing, but two people missing? That's when the investigation broke open. It was Tasha's phone records that gave detectives their first real lead. Her last outgoing call, made at 12:14 p.m. on the day of her disappearance, had gone to a number registered to a local courier, Jamal Briggs. He was a part-time delivery driver known for running weekend drop-offs for local online retailers. Jamal hadn't shown up to his evening deliveries. He hadn't checked in with dispatch. And when officers visited his apartment, no one answered. His car was still in the lot, but his phone went straight to voicemail. Two missing people, connected by one call. And the only person to see both of them that day? Marcus Tillman. With that, the case shifted from a missing persons report to a possible double homicide. Detectives got a warrant to search Marcus's truck. What they found was subtle, but damning. Though the bed liner had been thoroughly cleaned with bleach, a forensic team using luminol detected faint traces of blood. Too faint to identify at first, but enough to raise suspicion. And then came the break investigators had been waiting for. 5 days after the disappearance, a local fisherman at Crenshaw Lagoon reported a terrible smell coming from a reeds. Officers arrived and began a search of the shoreline. What they found would confirm their worst fears. 2 large duffel bags, waterlogged and bound with rope, had washed up from shallows. Inside were the decomposed remains of Tasha and Jamal. Both had been shot. Tasha once in the chest, Jamal twice, both in the head and torso. The sheets they were wrapped in matched the pattern of the Tillman bedroom set. The black plastic bags were the kind sold in bulk at a local home improvement store, receipts from which were later found in Marcus's email. A forensic sweep of Marcus's home turned up additional evidence. A pair of gloves tucked beneath the laundry bin with tiny flecks of blood on the fingertips. A burned patch in the backyard fire pit containing fragments of fabric and scorched metal, possibly part of a belt buckle. Cell tower data placed Marcus's phone in the area of Crenshaw Lagoon on the night of the disappearance, despite his claim that he never left the house. Now, detectives had motive, means, and mounting physical evidence. They just needed a confession, or someone to crack. And soon, Marcus Tillman would find that silence can't shield a killer forever. On the morning of March 19th, just a week after the bodies of Tasha Tillman and Jamal Briggs were recovered from the Crenshaw Lagoon, detectives showed up at Marcus Tillman's home, not with questions, but with handcuffs. Marcus had seen the squad car pulling into the driveway. According to the arresting officer, he didn't run. He didn't resist. He simply opened the front door, glanced past the badge, and said, "I figured this was coming." With that, Marcus was taken into custody and booked to the Fulton County Jail on 2 counts of first-degree murder and abuse of a corpse. The story that had consumed the neighborhood, the media, and 2 grieving families had found its prime suspect. Inside the interrogation room, Marcus kept his composure. He sat quietly across the table, shoulders squared, eyes steady. The detective started slow, asking again about the day Tasha disappeared, where he went, what time he noticed she was gone. At first, he gave the same rehearsed timeline he had from the start. But this time they weren't asking. They were watching. Then the photographs came out. Crime scene photos. The bodies. The sheet from the master bedroom. The phone data. The cell tower pings that placed his phone near the lagoon. You want to know what really happened? Marcus finally said, almost under his breath. He leaned back, sighed heavily, then whispered, "She broke me." Over the next 3 hours, Marcus slowly unfolded the story. A chilling, detached account of betrayal, rage, and cold calculation. He said he came home early from work that day. He had left the warehouse a few hours ahead of schedule after a canceled delivery run. When he walked to the front door, he heard laughter, a man's voice, and his wife's. He didn't go upstairs immediately. He listened. He waited. He said he wanted to believe it was just the TV. But when he heard the creak of the bed frame and muffled moans, he knew. "I lost it," Marcus admitted. "I wasn't thinking. I just saw red." He went to the closet, retrieved his handgun, a weapon he claimed he hadn't touched in months, and stormed into the bedroom. What happened next took less than a minute. Jamal tried to reach for his clothes. Tasha screamed. Marcus shot Jamal once in the chest, then twice more as he staggered. Tasha tried to run, but he shot her too, once, center mass. There was no remorse in his voice, just exhaustion. He admitted to wrapping the bodies in sheets, cleaning the room with bleach, and dragging them to his truck during the early hours of the morning. By dawn, he had dumped them into the Crenshaw Lagoon. When detectives asked him why he didn't turn himself in, Marcus replied, "Because I knew no one would care about what led to it, just that I pulled the trigger." News of the arrest shattered both families. Tasha's mother collapsed when detectives delivered the update. Her father, stoic and silent, only said, "He didn't just kill my daughter. He killed our future." Jamal's brother called the act cowardly, saying Marcus could have walked away, could have divorced her, but instead chose to play God. On the other side, Marcus's sister defended him through tears. "He was a good man," she said, "hard-working, loyal. Something must have snapped. That wasn't the brother I knew." But sympathy was scarce. Even those closest to Marcus admitted he had always been private and slow to forgive. In the eyes of the law, the confession sealed his fate. But for the families left behind, it offered no peace, only confirmation of what they feared most. Marcus didn't just commit a crime. He tried to erase 2 lives, then carry on like nothing happened. And now, justice had finally caught up with him. The trial of Marcus Tillman began on a humid Monday morning in early September, just 6 months after the double homicide that had gripped the city. Every seat in the courtroom was filled. Family members on both sides, reporters, and curious onlookers who wanted to witness the courtroom drama firsthand. What unfolded over the next 2 weeks was equal parts heartbreaking and horrifying. The prosecution wasted no time setting the tone. In his opening statement, the lead prosecutor, James Ellison, declared, "This wasn't a crime of passion. This was an execution." Marcus Tillman did not just lose control. He planned how to erase 2 people and nearly succeeded. His words were sharp, unwavering, and aimed to make the jury see Marcus not as a betrayed husband, but as a cold-blooded killer. They presented damning evidence. Photos of the crime scene, forensic analysis of blood splatter patterns, and cell tower data showing Marcus's phone pinging near the Crenshaw Lagoon just after 3 a.m. the night of the murders. Then came the confession video. The jury watched silently as Marcus, in his own words, described walking into the bedroom, finding his wife with another man, and pulling the trigger 3 times. The room was still when it ended. No gasps, no whispers, just tension. The defense attempted to shift the narrative. Marcus's attorney argued that while the act was not excusable, it stemmed from extreme emotional distress. He was pushed past the edge, the defense claimed. What he saw would break any man. They introduced character witnesses, former co-workers and friends, who described Marcus as hard-working, devoted, and never the violent type. But the prosecution countered with Marcus's own admission. He cleaned the scene, wrapped the bodies, and dumped them hours later. This was not a man in a blind rage, the prosecutor argued. This was someone thinking clearly enough to cover his tracks. Perhaps the most emotional moment came when Tasha Tillman's mother took the stand. She could barely speak through her sobs as she held up a framed photo of her daughter. "She didn't deserve this," she said. "Even if she made a mistake, she didn't deserve to die." The courtroom was equally moved when Jamal Briggs's teenage son, from a previous relationship, took the stand. He shared how his father had just started a new delivery job and was working extra shifts to help him buy a used car. "I was supposed to see him that weekend," he said quietly, "but he never showed up." The jury deliberated for less than 8 hours. On the 3rd day, the verdict was read aloud. Guilty on all counts. 2 charges of first-degree murder, unlawful disposal of human remains, and obstruction of justice. Marcus showed little reaction as the verdict was announced. No tears, no visible remorse. He stood still, eyes forward, as if he had already accepted his fate. The sentencing came a week later. The judge, citing the brutality and premeditation of the crime, handed down 2 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. "You didn't just take 2 lives," she said. "You shattered 2 families and showed not a shred of regret." Outside the courthouse, the reactions were raw and emotional. Tasha's father called it a step toward justice. Jamal's sister said she hoped Marcus spends every day thinking about what he took from this world. But not everyone found closure. Marcus's sister sobbed as she left the courtroom. He wasn't a monster, she said, but he became one in a single moment. In the public eye, Marcus Tillman went from a grieving husband to a symbol of how anger, unchecked and unaddressed, can erupt into irreversible violence. The trial may have ended, but the scars it left on both families and on an entire community would remain for years to come. In the weeks following Marcus Tillman's conviction, the city began to settle into a fragile stillness. The headlines faded. News trucks pulled away. But for the families left behind, the nightmare hadn't ended. It had only changed shape. Tasha Tillman's family held a second memorial service, a quiet, intimate gathering of close friends and relatives. Her mother spoke through tears, remembering her daughter as beautiful, sharp-tongued, and loyal, sometimes to a fault. No one spoke much of the affair that had preceded her death. "We're not here to judge her mistakes," her aunt said. "We're here to honor her life." The grief within the Briggs family ran equally deep. Jamal Briggs had 2 children from a previous relationship, teenagers who were now forced to grow up without their father. His sister, Cassandra, told a local reporter, "We want people to remember that Jamal was more than what happened to him. He was a hard-working man who got caught in someone else's tragedy." Marcus's side of the family fell into quiet disarray. His sister left the state. His parents stopped answering media calls altogether. At first, there was denial, then shame. In a statement released months after sentencing, the Tillmans simply said, "We're praying for all the families affected by this, including our own." Online, the case sparked fierce debate. Social media was split. Some called Marcus a betrayed man pushed too far, while others saw him as a textbook abuser who used jealousy as a weapon. True crime forums picked apart the details, the text, the timeline, the decision to dump the bodies rather than call police. The moral questions kept circulating. Did the betrayal justify the rage? Was this truly a moment of passion or a calculated execution? Legal experts weighed in, using the case in law school discussions around criminal intent and emotional triggers. One former prosecutor remarked in an interview, "This case isn't just about infidelity. It's about control, ego, and a refusal to accept that being hurt doesn't give you the right to destroy." For the community, the tragedy left behind deeper lessons. Churches hosted seminars on healthy conflict resolution in marriage. A local counseling center reported a rise in calls from couples seeking therapy after news of the crime spread. "It shook people," said one therapist, "because it was so sudden, so extreme. It made people wonder, how close am I or my partner to something like this?" In the prison where Marcus Tillman now serves 2 life sentences, he remains quiet and mostly isolated. He's been offered mental health services, though it's unclear if he accepts them. According to one source, he doesn't speak much about the crime. He simply exists day to day in a routine built to erase time. Back in the city, the home where the tragedy unfolded was sold to a new family. The walls were repainted, the bedroom furniture replaced. But neighbors say that sometimes, especially on quiet nights, they still think about what happened behind those doors. The case of Marcus Tillman didn't just make headlines. It left scars on children who lost their parents, on families who lost a piece of their future, and on a community forced to confront how quickly love, betrayal, and rage can combust into something irreversible. As one neighbor put it, "You never really know what's happening inside someone else's home. What starts as a whisper of trouble can turn into a scream, and by the time anyone hears it, it's already too late."